assure you that is not the case.
No, I would not accuse of you of being involved in a
We
conspiracy.
are not trying to modify the data to fit the theory. There's nothing that I would like more than to find some fundamental flaw with the neo-Darwinian theory of evolution. I would become a wealthy person. I would enjoy enormous success in life. I just can't find it. It's not there.
Carbon dating is, how it works, my understanding of carbon dating, and then because I think the average layman does not comprehend it. And here's the Hovind explanation, and you can take notes and tell me where I'm wrong. The Earth has an atmosphere around it, roughly 200 miles thick, though effectively only 10 or 15 miles thick. But radiation from the sun and stars, stellar radiation, but mostly the sun's radiation, strikes the atmosphere and produces carbon-14. This carbon-14 is produced by the extra energy from the sunlight. Today's atmosphere is 0.0000765% radioactive carbon. Most of it is normal carbon, but a small amount is radioactive carbon. Normally carbon is atomic number 12. Carbon-14 is simply the radioactive isotope of carbon. Most of it is normal
oxygen typically to become carbon dioxide, and it mixes in with the atmosphere with all the rest of the carbon dioxide that's out there. The wind currents and convection currents generally mix it, so we would assume whatever's being formed in the upper atmosphere is about the same proportion in the lower atmosphere. Not never proven, but a reasonable assumption, and I won't argue about that. Plants breathe in CO2 and make it part of their tissue. Animals eat the plants and make it part of their bodies. So the assumption is that whatever ratio of carbon-14 is in the upper atmosphere would be the same that's in the plants and in the animals. Probably a reasonable assumption. I won't argue with that. Radioactive carbon-14 compared to normal carbon-12 is the ratio that they're looking for. So they assume that the amount in the atmosphere is the same ratio found in plants and animals. When the plant or animal dies, it stops taking in new C14. Stops breathing, stops eating. Whatever it has begins to decay. And half of this carbon-14 is going to decay every 5,730 years, roughly. Some might argue about the number, but it's the concept I want you to get. Some say 5,690, but 5,630 is close enough. Half of the carbon-14 is going to decay, fall apart. So, by comparing the amount of C14 in the object being dated with the amount currently in the atmosphere, it can be determined how long the object has been dead. This all sounds good, except it's based on several assumptions that throw the whole thing off. If I told you to fill a barrel with water, but I had drilled holes on the other side of the barrel, so as you reach up a certain point, it starts to leak out. You're adding it, and it's leaking out at the same time. This is a good analogy of how carbon dating works. The sun produces it, and radioactive decay takes it out. At some point, when you're filling the barrel, you're going to reach a stage called equilibrium, where you're filling it, and it's leaking at the same speed, and you will never fill the barrel. Well, Willard Libby, University of Chicago, and others have done lots of studies. He's the one who invented carbon dating, got a Nobel Prize for it in '53. The sunlight producing carbon-14 in the atmosphere and the decay taking it out should at some point reach equilibrium. So the studies came back where the result was that probably if you took a brand new Earth, created it from scratch, stuck it out in the solar system, let this process begin, sunlight producing it, decay taking it out, it would take about 30,000 years for the atmosphere to reach equilibrium. Well, the atmosphere is still not in equilibrium. C14 is increasing in the atmosphere. There is more now than there was 100 years ago or 50 years ago when they first tested it. So that proves carbon-14 is a great proof the Earth is less than 30,000 years old because it is still not in equilibrium. Today, the calibration curve for carbon dating, you get about 16 clicks on your, this is a rough analogy here, about 16 clicks per minute per gram of C14. If you waited 5,730 years, you would expect to get half that amount, or 8. If you wait another 5,730 years, you would get only 4 clicks per minute per gram, and you would assume the object is 11,400 years old. Theoretically, it never goes to 0, but the line diminishes to where it's unmeasurable after 30 to 50,000 years. You just can't measure it because the line's basically straight. So I agree, if it all works right, you would get 30 to 50,000 years able to measure with carbon-14 dating. Problems, serious problems associated with this, and we can talk about all the other dating methods if you'd like, but if you walked into a room and found a candle burning on the table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? You say, I don't know, it was burning when I walked in. Well, we can do some things to this candle that are called empirical science. Hard, testable, nobody's going to argue with you, science. We can measure the candle. Let's suppose it is 7 inches tall. We get all the scientists in the world, we all measure it with incredible, precise instruments, and we all agree it's 7 inches tall. How long has it been burning? Anybody know? I won't tell you, will it? Let's do some more empirical science. Let's measure how fast it burns. Let's suppose after extensive testing, we all agree it's burning 1 inch an hour. Nobody's going to argue with the fact. Now, who can tell me how long it's been burning?
4.3 million years.
Correct. You got it. When was it lit? You can't tell me unless you're willing to make a few assumptions. Now, here's the assumptions. How tall was it? We have no idea. Has it always burned at the same rate? We have no idea. With carbon dating, we know how much carbon's in the object. That is measured very precisely, almost down to the atom. I don't argue with the ability to measure the C14 in a fossil. I don't argue with that. That's probably very correct. But they're assuming how much was in the laboratory always been the same. Has carbon-14 always decayed at the same rate? You mentioned several times this afternoon about potassium-argon dating. There have been numerous examples where potassium-argon dating has been shown to be wildly wrong. Hawaiian volcanic lava. I was just there a few weeks ago. 1802, the volcano erupted. They potassium-argon dated it at 3 billion years old, I believe, or some great wild number like that. See, the Bible teaches the earth used to have a protective canopy of water above the atmosphere. This is all gone. It fell down. It's in the oceans today. I can't prove this. This is part of the creation theory. This water would filter out radiation and prevent the formation of most carbon-14. So since our calibration curve today starts at 16, what if they started with 2 before the flood? If they only had 2 clicks per minute per gram of carbon on their Geiger counter from carbon-14 before the flood, we would dig them up 4,400 years later and assume they started at 16 and went from 16 to 8 to 4 to 2 to 1, when actually they went from 2 to 1. They're only 4,400 years old, but we think they're 40,000 years old, which is why they get so many wild dates. Here's the documentation if you want to check this out. Living mollusk shells dated at 2,300 years old. Science, volume 141. Freshly killed seal, carbon dated at 1,300 years old. Just killed it. Shells from living snails, carbon dated 27,000 years old. 1984. One part of the Valasovich mammoth, carbon dated 29,000 years old. Another part was 44,000 years old. How old was that mammoth? One part of Dima, the baby mammoth that was found dehydrated, carbon dated at 40,000 years old. Another part was 26,000 years old. And the wood around it was 10,000 years old. 3 different dates. This is talking about the same location. The lower leg of the Fairbanks Creek mammoth had a radiocarbon age of 15,380 years, while the skin and flesh were 21,300 years. How old was that mammoth? When did it die? 2 Colorado Creek mammoths had radiocarbon ages of 22,000 and 16,000, both in the same creek next to each other. So if someone wants to hang all of their eternity on the idea that carbon dating proves the earth is billions of years old, that I would highly recommend you not do. Carbon dating, though it is an interesting concept, is based on several obvious fundamental assumptions. How much was in that object? If the Earth's atmosphere today contains 16 clicks per minute per gram, you don't know that it's always had that. Matter of fact, we know that it hasn't always had that. Just in the last 50 years since they've measured it, it's increasing. Carbon dating, I think, is an excellent proof that the Earth is not billions of years old, and it's proof it was recently created. It has not yet reached equilibrium. They get wild dates from these, and I can tell you from experience